again today. We're actually recording this podcast 2 days in a row because we accidentally, well, not really accidentally, but just because of things coming up in our life, we didn't film one in January. So today in February, we're filming two, and then we'll release them for the months of January and February. So hopefully we'll be able to get more out as time goes on, but we're just still getting into the groove of things. So yeah, happy to be with you again today. Yeah. How are you today, Victoria?
I'm doing good. A little tired. I had a late night, but was a good day yesterday. Yeah, lots of stuff, and
Mm,
had some therapy yesterday evening. So
yeah,
yeah, just slept. Always sleep really well after. It just feels like unloading baggage. So yeah, it's great.
there's like a certain release.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah, and just feeling like really happy and like we always talk about like integration, so integrated afterwards and just feeling like, oh, we're talking about relationships because it was just Valentine's Day.
Oh,
So yeah, it was like, oh, I had to go giving everyone hugs and stuff, so it's good.
oh, that's good. That's nice. I've recently started to have a couple of sessions in counseling again, but I have it earlier on in the day. So I'm guessing that even that experience, like the time in the day when you have these kind of like it makes a difference if you do it before bed. I guess it's good that you sleep well. I don't know if I could necessarily sleep well because I would have like all this stuff buzzing. I don't know how it is for you. Does it kind of like just relax you or?
It's funny because normally I have it earlier in the day. I have it normally early on Tuesdays,
Mm.
but because of my work schedule now, I have to move one session to Thursdays, and it only works in the evening after all my work is done. So yeah, I thought it was gonna probably disrupt my sleep. I'm like, my brain's gonna be buzzing afterwards. And I think that's what's great about my therapist is she's very aware because I let her know my concerns that I'm not going to be able to sleep, and so we always do like a kind of a real like breath work and very calm integration before bed, and it hasn't affected my sleep so far. So yeah, yeah, I think she's also careful about the topic we talk about, and
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so
that's
I mean,
helpful for
like
sure.
that's what it should be. It should be client led and have its client schedules in mind rather than just, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I feel sometimes some forms of helping professionals, it's very almost a bit scripted. I did actually have one of the clients I worked with talk about, it was a teen boy, and he just talked about how he didn't feel connected to one of his therapists that he was working with. He's like, it felt like she was just going through a script, like asking me the same questions every time. And he was a really smart boy, really smart. He's just like, I could tell that her heart wasn't in it. It was just like she was just doing her job. And
Um,
I think the clients can tell when it's not real, when we talk about like empathy and actually being there with the client and feeling their experience.
yeah.
And when and I get it, it's a hard profession. It
Mm.
takes a lot out of you. And when you see client after client after client, I feel you almost have to turn off a bit because otherwise it's straining. So
So today, what we'd like to talk about is the topic or the theme will be what has been coming up for us since starting this podcast. Um, and we were talking a little bit earlier about when we talk about our past, childhood stories, it's very much, a certain time in our life when we were children. We can go into that space and then we discuss it with our counselor or a therapist or, helper, someone who will listen to us. And then, we're developing the skills and the tools we need to deal with some of those difficult moments in our past. But then that finishes and we come out of that time and we've got to go back into real life, everyday life with loved ones, with our spouses, with our children, going back into work. Having gone into those places where all these things were just unearthed and uncovered, then how do you then go back into those spaces with all this, like, bubbling right under the surface? And many times, going back to those things that can be triggering for us, or, memories can come up, or certain emotions or sensations or feelings or things you haven't thought about in years, they're right there now. And how do you then go back into the real world and then deal with these things? And the place where you interface between the past and then the present, I think what Victoria and I have discovered is that at the beginning, for sure, it's not easy. And what I learned myself was that I made a big mess of it a lot of the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, how do I go from that into this? And it was just so much to hold and realize that all those stories and all those themes and patterns and things, it's now coming to, you know, um, fruition or reality. I have to deal with, the manifestation of all of those things. And sometimes that's really hard. Um, so what are some of the things that we can do and some of the skills that we can use that will help us be in that space, in reality, present time, real time with our family and loved ones and friends all around us? That's what Victoria and I were discussing. So some of the things that we would like to bring today is actually what's come up for Victoria since we started this podcast and what's come up for me. Yeah, anything you wanted to add to that, Vix?
I'm just really excited for this topic because that was one of my main fears going into therapy. And I started therapy about 3.5 years ago. And one of the first things I think I asked my therapist was, what do I do? I've got so much heavy stuff in the past that I need to, I'm going to be unpacking here, right? Um, how do I then go from me, I'm a crier and feel everything really deeply and really strong. How do I go from an hour and a half or sometimes even 2 hours it stretches to of that to then go back to take care of my kids and to go to work and to do all the stuff that I need to do? How do I stay a functional human being while healing, while digging up this really painful stuff from the past? How is that going to work? Am I going to have to completely shut down my day-to-day life or just become like a basket case and everyone's like has to carry me around because I can't function myself? Or are they going to have to make space for me and tiptoe around me because I'm so dysregulated? And if that's the case, I don't want to do it. I was like, I was so scared that it was going to affect my daily life. And while it did, I mean, it's very alive and present when all the stuff comes up. I also believe that a good helping practitioner knows how to create a container and close the container after it's finished. It's almost like you have this little safe box that you do all this work in, and then when you're done, you kind of close the box, you do some integrating experiences. So there's a very clear pattern of beginning, middle, end. You are aware of it, you know what's going on. And at the end, it's almost this, okay, and even if something is not really fully integrated yet, or it's still kind of a question, a little bit open, it's very much like, we'll just put a pin in this. And because it's such a regular thing, you're not like left with all the stuff is coming up in me. And now what? You almost kind of teaches you delayed gratification a little bit of if we're going to get around to it, that there is a time and place. And I find that in my work with kids, we are teaching these skills of, yes, you're angry, but there's a container for it. You don't take it into other places. You don't lash out at other humans. And we will get around to your anger. And it's almost this child part of you that is angry or has these big emotions and is afraid it's not going to be seen. But what about, time's ending with my therapist and what am I going to do? And it's like, no, your time will come again, almost reassuring that inner child that you will have the time to discuss this again and feel this again. There is a time and place for it. And it's actually reteaching your inner child. So it's emotional intelligence. That's what I found a lot of, like, oh wow, yeah, I'm kind of getting a little bit anxious toward the end of my time with my therapist, and she soothes me like a parent would, right? And teaches me skills to do that for myself.
Yeah.
And then when I meet her next time, we can bring it up again. And a lot of times it's actually resolved by then. It's interesting that
Mm.
reassuring that part of you, sometimes that's all it needs. It doesn't need the fix or the resolution. It's just the soothing. And it's like, you're going to be heard. We're not putting you away and sending you to your room, right? That
Yeah.
um, dismissal. And so
Mm.
I find that that was really helpful for me, just having a practitioner that can do that.
Wow, that's amazing. I love you bringing up that having that experience with the practitioner who's led you through these exercises, taken you through on this journey so that you realize, okay, this is what it feels like to be, to be held, to be contained, to be seen, to be heard, and to have my emotions acknowledged and worked with. And I know that it's possible. I want more of it. Can't happen right now, but she's modeled that she's that secure base for me. We're going to come back to this place. It's not going to end, and you have that, you build up your inner assurance and that resilience and knowing that you're going to get there again. It's all right. And then that starts to give you also this inner confidence that I've been through it before. You know what to expect. And you start then to be able to, like you use the word soothe. I love that, to soothe yourself. And okay, I know it's all right. She's not there, but she will be. And she's taught me. And this is how it feels. And kind of when you recognize that feeling of that inner soothing and that peace, you know what it feels like. And you start to slowly learn also how to do that for yourself. That's
Yep.
amazing. And that's something that, yeah, I've experienced as well, is that it isn't always super neatly packaged. It's really messy and really confusing, but you have hope and you have assurance that you know what it feels like. You've experienced it before, you know it's possible, and you can get to that place again, either with someone and eventually by yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you
Mm.
really think about it, and I always, this is why I love doing this work with kids, because I'm like, that part of us that we're bringing into therapy, the angry part, the hurt part, whatever, it's our inner child coming out, the inner child that never got the chance or was allowed to in a safe place, didn't have that safe person to process all their emotions and feelings, and only we're doing it with 30 years of baggage, right? When we do it with kids, we are basically having a safe parent or safe adult who provides that space for kids. That's basically what therapy is, right? Only therapy is an adult doing it with their inner child, and the therapist, the helping professional, is that safe person. So I was like, it's
Mm.
when you look at it and equate it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually what we're doing in therapy. It's creating an experience that you should have had in childhood with a safe parent or a safe adult. And many of us didn't experience that. So if we can create this for our own children, and I will say we have to do the work ourselves, the therapist or the helping professional will be the model for us to do it ourselves. So we can be our own good parent or inner parent.
Mm.
And then when we are able to do it for ourselves, we know what it feels like, and we are able to do it for our children. So really, we're doing like, we talked about passing the torch yesterday, right? And it's continuing and passing along these skills to other people.
And you
So
get
yeah,
better with every iteration for yourself
yeah,
and with the children. That's amazing. Great. So yeah, that's what we wanted to talk about, is what's been coming up for Victoria, what's been coming up for myself. And I, at least from my end, and maybe for Victoria too, what I have to share, it will probably go a little bit deeper today, but I've also realized something beautiful that Victoria said yesterday was, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give permission to others to be vulnerable as well. And I think that's what we're trying to do in this space, is really be, and I know this is a cliche term and it's thrown around a lot, authentic self and vulnerability, but I really feel that the proof is in the pudding. From sitting and listening, you very quickly know if that is the authentic person that you're seeing, or the story behind the person, as you put yesterday, Vicky, or if it's just a narrative. It's something that we're meant to buy into because it sounds good, it sounds right, but there's something that doesn't necessarily resonate with us on a heart level when it's something that, that someone's putting up. So I think that's what we're really trying our best to do here, is take away all those like facades and the masks and this, that, and the other, and get to the real heart and root of our stories. And when we allow ourselves to do that, we give permission to others to say, hey, they did it. And yeah, it was uncomfortable and it was emotional at times, and we're all okay. And that was actually really good. And as long as it resonates on a heart level, I think that's the goal in all of this. You can feel it. You feel it in your body if someone's speaking the truth and if they are being truthful. So it may go a bit deeper, like I said, uncomfortable, tears, emotional, all of
Like
the above.
tissues.
Yes, that's why. Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yeah. And then to end on a lighter note, if we have time, we would like to just talk a little bit about how we came up with this name Sondervous. There's a really fun story behind it, and hopefully we'll get to it. So, yeah, well, let's just jump right in. So, Vix, I'd like to hold space for you just to share with us what has come up for you since starting this podcast.
Mm. So it's actually a kind of a theme that's been going on with me since I started having, creating an online social media presence and things like that. Because I guess, we've always, in a way, we talked about in our first episode, kind of been in the spotlight, right? Facade, not facade, but everybody sees us and we have to keep up this facade of being
Mm,
happy and whatever all the time. And it was very much coached. It wasn't really us. It was like, you must appear a certain way, you must act a certain way, you must always be a good example, or a sample as we called it, which was
mm,
hilarious. Like, why a
good
sample? But
example.
yeah, good sample as we were told. um and it wasn't really, I never felt it was my authentic self because
Mm,
I was kind of a shy kid, right? And I was always a little bit, the one, I think dad told us that I was the one who kind of watched from a distance and didn't really jump right in and like assess the situation. So I was never comfortable being put out in front and being told to smile and interact with strangers. It was so uncomfortable for me. And I think growing up and getting into our teens, it became a little bit more like, oh, the attention and the kind of glory, and we got to be up on stage, which with hundreds of thousands of people watching us, and that felt good for the ego, but it still felt very uncomfortable. The same thing when we started to get into modeling, right? We modeled for a couple of years, while we were in China. And I loved the attention, like, oh, I'm a model now, right? I love the title. It felt good for the ego, but it didn't feel good for who I was. Like I felt so uncomfortable being in front of a camera and posing and doing all these, even the commercials we did. I was like, it's so fake. I don't like acting because it's not true. Like I don't like this brand of shampoo. It was just always really weird to me to pretend to like something I didn't like, or pretend to be someone that I wasn't. And so I kind of felt like I hid for a while when I got to be an adult and a mom, and I was like, I'm a mom now. That's my job, right? And then as I started my coaching business, and I got a business coach, and she was all like, okay, you need to be seen on social media, and you know guiding us on how to create our online presence. And so for me, and I know a lot of other coaches and helping professionals or business owners struggle with being seen, and being seen as their authentic self, not being seen as somebody else, how, somebody wants to brand you or whatever, like your authentic self. And so for me, I think the thing that was most difficult was my, right? This, talking about this, right? And this was probably about 2 or 2.5 years ago now. And I had shared part of my story as an exercise I was doing with another storytelling coach, and sent it out to a couple of people. And the response I got was, maybe not a good time to tell your story. Not from everybody, but from a couple people. And I was so like, oh, see, it's, my story's like, it shouldn't be heard, it shouldn't be told. Um, it's too much, right, for people. And it's too intense and it's going to hurt other people. I think, when you tell the story that involves other people, what are they going to think about it? So I felt like, okay, see, I'm not ready to be seen. And so my business coach, she really did encourage me, like, no, you have a story to tell, kind of like what you're doing, Mush. You have a story to tell, and it's important, and people need to hear it. The right ones will resonate with you, and the ones that don't aren't your people. And so I finally just felt the fear, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, put it out there. And it was funny because I don't know what I was expecting from it, but the relief I felt like it's out there as the first step in being seen. That for me was like such a huge milestone. And then gradually, business coach encouraging me be consistent, start putting a little bit more of yourself out there. And of course, there's always a balance between what's putting yourself out there too much and just we talk about like boundaries and people who kind of earn the right to know your story because these are personal things, right? And the world is full of judgment. And that was always my thing about being seen. Being seen equal judgment. That was one of the other stories I was going to tell about Christmas, how performing to me equaled judgment, equaled people criticizing you. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't want to be seen because I don't know if I can take the judgment. And you could see out there, people are so harsh. They don't even know you and they just make assumptions about you based on whatever. And I
Mm.
was like, I don't know if I want to do that. And so just having someone push me to be consistent and to take a little step further, push yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit more. And like we talked about yesterday, leaving the cult. Oh, I did it. And it wasn't too bad. What about if I try a little bit more and just pushing yourself a little bit? And so that for me was, I think, the beginning. But in all of this came just this fear of, I know the way I think, obviously, as I'm doing therapy and everything, I'm starting to understand myself really well. And I know who I am now. I know what I think. But is the world ready for that? Right? Is who I am, what I have to say, how I say it, is it acceptable in the world? And I guess feeling that I might kind of went a little um I think my style as well, because I watch a whole bunch of public speakers and other coaches and other people in the industry, and they always seem so professional, right? They're like the way they talk and they use these big words and everything just seems to flow with them. And me, I go blank quite often. Like I'm just like, oh, there's a word. What is it? Right. And I'm like, that's not professional. No one wants to hear that. No one wants to see that. And so I think I judge myself really harshly on my style of speaking, my style of talking and my storytelling and how I'm kind of goofy. It works really well with kids. Kids love the, animated face. With adults, they're like, you're kind of crazy. You're kind of too much. I always got this message that you're a bit too much, right? This was in my 20s. Whenever I started to get close to people or start to tell them about my story, I usually got a ooh, and people would back away from me. So I got again that message we were talking about yesterday. You're too much. Something's wrong with you, right? So I kind of felt that again of if I speak out and be authentic and start saying things the way I want to say them, people are going to judge me for it. They're going to think I'm unprofessional. They're going to think I don't know what I'm talking about. And I must still package what I have to say and how I say it in this certain way that makes it acceptable to the world. And so I guess doing this podcast, I was like, I've done some online courses now. I've created videos and I do my own trainings on YouTube. And so I guess I'm more comfortable, but this is a lot more vulnerable because it's off the cuff, right? It's not, I don't have a bullet points to go on. And so I was always like, I don't know, this is like the next step. It's going to be so uncomfortable for me. And then I think what came up between us on our after our first podcast and the way I think we were also a little bit nervous, but the way we were talking and the way I was talking about things, I think I used a phrase maybe that was not exactly politically correct. But it was what we called it growing up. I talked about an old folks home, right? And yes, the proper term is retirement center or things like that. And I'm just used to calling it what we called it as a kid growing up. And so when you talked to me and said, old folks home, probably not not the best term. And for me, I was like, but it's not like a derogatory term. Like it's fine. And then we were kind of discussing back and forth about that. And I remember just feeling really hurt and I couldn't really explain it. And I was like, what? Like, we're talking about like a term. It's not a personal thing. She's not saying you're a bad person. Why am I taking this so personally? Like, why is it hurting me so bad? went to explore it. And what is going on here? There's something deeper. And I realized it was almost a a repeat of this pattern I had of growing up of you're not saying the right thing. You have to um what's the word I'm looking for? You have to almost change how you say things so that it packages better, so the world will be able to accept it. And I was like, you know what? I have fought so hard in these last 2 years being comfortable with finally telling my story and putting myself out there and risking rejection and criticism. And I've gotten to the point where I'm okay with showing up as me. And now this again is kind of like, see, you don't say the right thing. You don't say it in the right way. It's this criticism again that I just felt still alive in me, even though I was trying to quash and being like, nope, I'm okay. If the world doesn't accept it, that's okay. I'm still gonna be me. And it was just a reminder of you're not doing things the right way, you're not enough, or you're too much. And I was like, no, I'm gonna be. So I think I told you, I was like, I really want to just show up in the way that I show up. If I say the wrong thing, maybe we edit it out or whatever, or we give an explanation, but I don't want to speak in a way that is fake or that is contrived because that's not me. And so I think that's what's come up for me a lot of finally being okay and in practice as well, not just in my head, oh yeah, I'm okay, I'm enough. No, actually in practice and putting it out into the world and risking criticism for that.
Yeah.
And
Mm,
finally, it's just another step of are you really okay with you say you're okay with yourself? Now put it into practice and
mm.
see if you can do it without all these feelings of, oh, I said something wrong. I need to edit myself out. I need to filter myself, which I honestly feel if we're being authentic, we leave space for those messy moments and those faux pas or whatever, because that is who you are. And other people need to see that too, because nowadays what we see online, it's AI, it's filters, it's, angles and poses. It's not true people's, it's not who they really are. And we get so much of that online. And especially working with kids, I want to be an example that you can be yourself, you can be messy, and there are people that are going to love you for it. And the people who don't aren't your people anyway, so it doesn't matter. And of
Mm.
course, it's a hard thing, right, to put into practice. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Everything you just said was like boom, boom, boom. Yeah, so true. What really struck me was when you said, I don't know if you necessarily use the word show up for myself, but because we just recorded the second episode yesterday where you bring this story about how you were shamed and berated for being punished for not being good enough or not perfect enough or not something enough. And in that moment, there was no one to say, no, wait a second, you are enough. You're wonderful. You're amazing. It is not your fault. This is nothing to do with you. This is what happens when little bunnies, get hurt, just matter of fact. And now you're tested in this moment where, again, your voice is being challenged, your authentic self. And you, in that moment, have this, opportunity to either say, kind of stand with the people who berated you and who shamed you, to stand with them and say, yeah, you better just keep that under wraps, just be good, just be sweet, just be nice, just fit in, or to actually stand with that little girl and say, no, you're great. You're awesome. Let your voice be heard. Whatever you need to say it. It matters. It's important. You be you. You go ahead and do Vicky. And in that moment, that shift where you go from standing with those who are like, mm-mm, to you, I'm like, no, I'm going to be me. I'm going to be, unapologetically me. Oh, that is just so beautiful. And that conversation that we were having back and forth, like, what term should we use, or should we edit this out or not? And there was, like you said, some back and forth and a little bit of, I wouldn't necessarily say friction, but there was definitely something that needed to be talked about, something that needed to be engaged. And we weren't just kind of brushing it under the carpet. And I think that's where, in kind of the thick and messiness of it, kind of the truth comes out and you start to see what you're really made of. And you have
Yes.
an opportunity to then pass these tests and show yourself, no, I'm making it. I'm passing those hurdles and meeting those challenges along the way. And even the fact that you were able to bring that to me and say, you know, Michelle, this is something that's come up for me. I think in the past it may have been difficult for us to have those
Oh yeah.
conversations where we're like, I'm struggling with something and you're struggling with something, and we're like, you know. But
Yeah.
we're here in this space, and in a sense, there is a, you could say, a therapeutic relationship being connected and being created, where I'm learning you and you're learning me, and we're holding space for each other and talking, and not holding space in the sort of like, abstract sense. We're holding space for each other. But when you hold space for each other, it's sometimes almost more like wrestling with each other. And
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
to like get used to that discomfort of pushing and pulling and shoving, and because it's in those places where you finally actually meet, where you meet and you see each other, and you're talking about this now and how it was for you. And like, I don't know all the details of the backstory, kind of like in the general sense I do, but when you actually put words to it and you name those moments of significance and how important it was for you, and it really, I want to say drives the point home, but it really lands. It lands like, oh, I get it. I get why it's important. And even for me right now, I feel so much more compassion and like, oh yeah, of course, absolutely. Say what you want, say whatever you want. It doesn't matter in the end, because we're here with the right intention, with the right, motivation. We're not going to get it right all the time. We're gonna, mess up or, slip a word here or there. And it really doesn't matter. What matters is that we're here being ourselves, and like being able to wrestle sometimes, being able to dance sometimes, but what we're creating is just so much more beautiful, like you said, than the AI and the filters and the posing that, everyone has just kind of gone on with. And, we don't need more of that. There's enough of that out there already. So,
Yeah. And,
oh,
and the
so
people I always
beautiful.
find like the people I resonate the most with are the messy ones, right? They're the coaches who show up or the speakers who show up. I always said I love Mel Robbins because one of the things about her, yes, she's incredibly professional and knows her stuff, but at the same time, she'll post herself in bed who, forgot my workout again, can't get out of bed today, just not feeling it. And I love that because it's like you see so many people, the world wants to see successful people, and this is what success is. And working 47 days in a row and all this big, push, 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 go, 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 never shows weakness, never shows vulnerability. And or the people who look like they're showing vulnerability, it's kind of this crafted vulnerability, which is
Oh,
still not vulnerability. I
crafted
forgot who was
vulnerability.
it that said, I think it was Brene Brown that said, she's like, posting your bikini wax on Instagram is not vulnerability, right? So I'm like, yeah, you have people who definitely overshare. And that is a conscious decision to overshare. That's not necessarily vulnerability. So, right. So a lot of people think like, oh, I'm sharing all the messy details of my life and just venting about my relationships. And for me, that's not necessarily vulnerability. That's almost like, I don't know if I could say what it is exactly, but vulnerability feels different to me. It's not just, hey, here are all the messy bits of me. There is some purpose behind it. It's not a I don't know what I'm trying to say, but yeah, I feel like you do
Yeah, I
get
get
the
it.
really crafted side of social media, and then you get the really messy side of social media. But there, like you talked about vulnerability, there's something about it that resonates with you. It's like you can tell when it comes from a place of true vulnerability and when it comes from a place of, I'm just going to let it all hang out and air my dirty laundry. And I don't care who it hurts. Or I don't care if it
Mm,
hurts the people I'm talking about. It's just bleh, I'm going to dump all my
mm,
dirty laundry here.
mm,
Vulnerability for me feels a little bit more intentional.
mhm.
Yeah.
And I think there's something that's still very um we're losing our words now, but going deep and it's a bit uncomfortable. But there's something that's quite careful and even cautious about vulnerability. You care and you're being intentional, and what's the word I'm looking for? Constructive, maybe. There's something that is constructive about it where you're like, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I'm going to move past my comfort zone, but there's a reason behind it. I'm doing something because of it. It's not just, like you said, throwing it all out there. I really don't care. You're looking like you care, you're seeming like you care, but actually by your actions, you really aren't.
Yeah.
And because if anyone were then to come back to you and give you maybe a little bit of feedback and say, I noticed this, what about this? I kind of feel or sense that that probably wouldn't be very well received. Whereas when you're being vulnerable, you're hoping and looking for someone to reflect or be a mirror and bring something back to you. And you're going to take that, and that's going to be really valuable to you. But you've kind of put something out there because you're hoping for something back. When it's those, like you said, the contrived or the fake vulnerability, you're throwing it all out there and you don't really want anything back. So I think it's with the intention a little bit in why you're doing it. If that sort of makes any sense, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it's something to do with what I just talked about, like boundaries. And just
Mm.
learning Molly Davis. I love her. She's like kind of kooky like me. She explains things and she draws a whole bunch of pictures. But I love her because she talks about boundaries and how we're not taught this and the power versus responsibility formula and about how she draws it as an analogy of a house and garden, and she talks about how the house is like our inner world, like things about us that people don't know unless we really get to know them or they get to know us. So it's like our thoughts and our feelings and our values and our fears and things like that. And then we have the garden, which is outside, which is all the stuff about us that people can kind of see just from being acquaintances or kind of casual friends. And so she says a lot of times when people overshare what they're, and she draws these little stick figures, which I love. She goes, we're basically going out of our house, pulling somebody from the street, that we may be passing acquaintance, pulling them from the street and going, hey, come into my house, sit down on my bed and let me tell you all my life trauma,
No,
right? Wouldn't
no,
do that,
wouldn't do
right? And
that.
that's what I'm talking about, these vulnerability and oversharing. And of course, sometimes people do it with the best intentions. And she explains that. She goes, there's empaths or people who want to connect with others. That's often why people overshare. But sometimes it's like it doesn't feel good for the person being dragged into the house. And also, we are not testing to see if these people can be trusted, right? We are oversharing so much about ourselves. And we don't even know, just like we wouldn't pull a stranger in from the street right to our bedroom and sit them down on our bed. We shouldn't be doing that in real life and putting everything out there for strangers who we don't really know can be trusted and may trigger something in them. So it's almost a kind of responsibility of I need to be mindful about what I share, if it's going to have a purpose behind it, if it's going to help people talk about their own stuff, or if it's just throwing it out there. I don't care if it triggers up any other people.
Mm.
um a little bit careless in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found like that analogy of, oh, because I know I have a habit of oversharing sometimes, and I have to be intentional with what is my purpose for sharing this. Is it
Mm.
to make myself feel better, to vent, or is it about my audience? Am I sharing this because it's actually there's a purpose behind it, right? And I feel like there's a difference there. And
Yeah.
especially when you're putting out content online, we talked about this, right? How it's almost there is so much garbage out there and just people's opinions. No one asked, right? But they have an
Mhm.
opinion about everything. And almost we have a responsibility when we're putting stuff out into internet space to make sure that it actually is valuable and it's not just
Mhm.
taking up more space and right, it's just not just more garbage.
Yes.
So
Yes,
yeah.
there is, I think, definitely a responsibility, and even I want to know that whatever I'm putting out there, creating, it's meaningful, it's thoughtful, and it's going to add value. It really, for me, adding value is really important. Yeah. Hmm. Wow.
So
Oh,
let's move
I
to
love that.
you.
That
What's
was
the big
good.
bring it up for you?
Oh, for me. Okay. It's been really helpful just listening to you, Vix, and even in the last 15, 20 minutes, I don't know, since we've been talking, you've already helped me to kind of figure some things out in my own mind that were still, like not really quite there yet, but now just listening to you, that's why having these conversations are so important. Even if you don't go into them thinking I'm going to check these boxes, but just through the process of communication and those mirror neurons where, you're meeting and I'm meeting and we're sharing things, there's something happening there that can't take place in any other way. They say that relationships are the things that wire our brain and that form our brain more so than anything else. So when we're having these relationships and this interface, there's something happening. There's growth and there's change and there's healing taking place. So even just in listening to you and the back and forth we've had now, I've started to have a bit more assurance and confidence about what it is exactly I want to say and share, and also knowing maybe I can save that for next time. So thank you for that. That's been really helpful. Yeah. Okay. So for me, what came up after our actually the first episode that we recorded at Christmas time, it was, I think, there were two kind of big things that have come up. And what I've kind of realized now is that I feel comfortable and confident to share the first one. And maybe the second one, I can keep that for another time. So the first thing that came up for me, it started to come up for me in the days following after we recorded the first podcast. So the topic that we discussed then was a lot about performing at Christmas time and, having to learn songs and dances. Not just that, but also having to appear a certain way, the smiles that were always needed to be plastered on our faces, the way that we presented our bodies, even like you said, we couldn't turn our backs. We had to always like be like this, facing the audience. And if we didn't, there would be consequences for that. So even if I didn't receive any explicit instruction, there were explicit instructions, but even the implicit messaging that I got as a child, the way I need to be, how I am valued, where my worth lay, I carried that with me, from childhood into my teenage years, into my adulthood as a young woman, getting married to another member who was in the group. And where it kind of hit home for me a few days following after we record the podcast was I was looking at these pictures of my boys when they were little, especially so I have two boys, Ryan and Broderick. Ryan's 20 now, Broderick's 18. And I was looking at these pictures of them when Broderick must have been around 3 and Ryan must have been around 5. And at that time, we were still a part of this group, this cult. We weren't as, how do you say, enmeshed as we were before. We were living as, just our family with our mom and dad, with our parents, and we weren't a part of a commune anymore, but we were still involved in, missionary activity and different charity projects which involved, going to very poor or underprivileged areas. We would bring clothes. Sometimes we would bring educational resources, and we were still performing in the way that. So I didn't play guitar very well, but I did have a guitar, and I was singing songs. I think we were singing songs in Chinese as well as English, and Ryan and Broderick, I had taught them to sing some of these songs, and they were doing little actions. And it was, kind of like teaching biblical principles, slash learning English at the same time in these very poor rural villages with these kids. So Ryan and Broderick were singing the songs, and I was playing guitar. I think we did some face painting. We also made sushi with the kids. It was over Children's Day, that holiday. And I'm looking at this picture, and there's several of us in this picture, and I'm kneeling down. I've got Ryan on one side, I've got Broderick on one side, and I'm looking at Ryan's face. And Ryan's the his personality has always been quite gentle, especially as a child. As a child, he was a very gentle, very sensitive boy. Their teachers in kindergarten, they used to describe Ryan as um, like one hua. So that's it comes to like being well cultured, civilized,
Civilized.
this sort of thing. Whereas for Broderick, they would say, "Oh, 这个小孩很无," like wushu, like the into martial arts, into basically kicking, punching, biting, doing all of that. So they would compare them.
Yes,
And I really didn't like
that's
that. Broderick was just, I mean, if you talk about what, children are different types of learners, Broderick was very tactile, kinesthetic. He learned through doing things. So he would never think. He would be shown something and immediately, boom, he just wanted to go in and do it. Ryan would sit back a little bit. He would look, he would ask questions. It wasn't like he was scared to try, but he wanted to learn as much as he could before he went in and did it. And he was, yeah, just more of a sensitive, gentle child. He liked to read. He was very imaginative, very creative. He started writing songs when he was about 5 or 6 years old. He was taking guitar lessons with our brother Philip, and he started writing these songs. I still have some of these songs. He was writing about like Star Wars and Mandalorian girlfriend and what was it like holographic girlfriend? I mean, I've got to take some of these things out. Sorry, Ryan, I'm going off on a tangent here, but it was just like he was just so amazing, and he had the side of him. So I'm looking at this picture and I see Broderick. Broderick looks great on one side. He looks like he's having a great time. But I look at Ryan on the other side and he has his face like he's going like this, like he's trying to keep his eyes open, but it actually looks like he's crying. But he's trying very hard to smile. Why? Because everybody needs to smile when we're on camera. And he looks like he's about to cry, but like he has to smile. And I just saw this picture of him and I thought, oh my goodness. And in that moment, it just caused me to think, what what did I learn as a young child growing up? And what did I bring with me into my adulthood? And what did I bring with me as a mother? Now, now there's nothing wrong with singing and performing and, interacting with children who are less privileged or doing activities with them to bring them some joy on children's holiday and stuff like that. But I'm thinking in that moment, that was me. And I brought whatever I carried with me, that was then, expressing itself in my 5-year-old son. The noise really bothered him when there was too much noise, too much activity going on. And this was like there were like, I don't know, 50 people in this picture. There were the organizers of the event, there were the other teachers that we were part of their volunteer group. There were all the children in the schools, at least 100, 150. We were going to several different schools. There was just a lot going on for a little 5-year-old who I don't know exactly, we never got him tested or anything like that, but just too much over sensory stimulation, it did bother him. And I'm seeing him there and I'm like, oh my goodness. In that moment, I just wanted to go to him and say, son, you're really struggling. Poor you, this is too much music, too much noise, too many people. You're being dragged from place to place to place. I see you. This is really tough for you. And I guess because we had talked about what we had to go through in childhood, and then thinking that, yeah, as a mother, that's what I would have been trying to or thought I needed to teach my children to do. Maybe I missed him in that moment. Maybe I just didn't see him. And I wish that I could have. I wish that I could have seen him and just held him and comforted him and in that moment, I don't think I did. I wasn't aware. But going back and looking at that picture, yeah, it did something for me. It softened my heart and it made me think that, we carry things with us, or like you said yesterday, our default, what we think is right. And we don't know any better. But, 10 years down the line, I do know better now. And I just want to hold him and say, son, you're struggling. Poor you, poor baby. You're crying. It's hard. Come here, come to mommy. Let's, just take a time out and just, breathe a little bit. So that was one thing that came up for me. And then while I'm looking, feel free to, jump in anytime and ask questions or just things that you notice, Victoria, because I'm going to go on for a little bit long here. But yeah, just feel free to cut in at
like I
any
said, I kind of
point.
get lost in the experience. I'm like, I'm there.
Yeah. And the second thing so going back to, what did I carry with me into, my adulthood as a mother from my own childhood that was making it hard for my own children. And then the other thing that came up for me was, oh, this is a bit deep and a bit difficult. But I also think that there's meaning in it. And for me, I guess I try to look, one lens of looking at things for me is looking at patterns, themes, and then meaning. And when you don't really take the time to kind of dig a little bit deeper and see these things, you kind of extract a certain meaning, and this is the meaning that you carry with you in your life about these stories. However, when you start to do this unpacking and maybe a little bit of, analytical work, and you say, I'm noticing this pattern and I'm noticing these themes, when you go back there and you start to understand it and really realize, it's not really what I thought it was, that's when the meanings start to change. And so the meaning for me in my stories have started to change over time and take on new meanings, and just ways that I'm understanding things now that I never did before. And this has to do with my, personal relationships. So Ryan and Broderick's dad, so my ex-husband, we were married in this group, in this cult. So at the age of around, I think I must have been 17, he was 19. That's when we first met each other. We were working, or we were living together in the same cult commune, and we got along quite well. We became friends, and we were doing a lot of activities together, fundraising together, different, charity projects and social work for the group and under their umbrella. And over time, we started to date. And then I think I must have been, yeah, when I was about 19, I became pregnant. Now we weren't married yet, but in the group, we were not allowed to date anyone outside of the group. Like I said, that isolation where this basically is your world, this is your family, this is all you will ever know. So you were encouraged to, we weren't allowed to go to public school to get secular education. Basically, by the time we were in what, eighth, ninth grade for many of us, that was it. Then you were responsible to start producing. Even before then, I mean, as children, we were already producing, we were already doing fundraising, bringing in finances for whatever commune we were in, to basically pay rent and pay bills and stuff like that. But at the ages of 17, 18, you are now supposed to carry the torch on. You're supposed to start your own families. And because we didn't have an education, we were not allowed secular jobs. We were not allowed to have anything that any life, anything that existed outside of the group. It was all within the group. So then what do you do? Well, get married. Well, then have children. Well, then bring your children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, basically, what the cult says you need to do. So that was our world and that was our reality. And that was pretty much as far as our bandwidth went. We couldn't think outside of that box. So when we were together in a relationship, I became pregnant at 19. Um, he asked me to marry him. And I actually, at first, I said no because there was just something in me that felt this isn't right. And I didn't understand why, even. I didn't have the capacity to process why, obviously, if you get pregnant, then you should get married, you should continue on. But my immediate gut reaction was just say no. But after a few months, we were, I would say, pressured, and there was a lot of coercion there to get married. You need to get married. This is the right next step for you. So we did. I was still 19. He was 21 at that time. And we we got married. I was 7 months pregnant at the time. So Ryan was born shortly after that. I became pregnant with Broderick a short while after that. And when I look back now, I mean, we were just kids. We were kids having kids, you know, but this was all we knew. And this was what we felt was the right thing to do. First of all, what God wanted us to do, what our leaders want us to do, what we needed to do to bring in God's kingdom to the world. So it was a very twisted way of looking at, how we were supposed to be in the world and how we were supposed to bring in goodness and, just basically be good people. So we raised our boys, and then about the time when Broderick must have been around 4, Ryan was 6. That's when we slowly started to move away from the group. It happened gradually, organically over time. But we just felt like, there wasn't much left there for us. We were really in not a good place. So we left the group slowly but surely, and then, slowly started to put our life together. It was hard because we didn't have an education, we didn't have jobs, and we had very little resources that could help us, get on our feet. And we already had two little kids that we needed to take care for. So we ended up opening our own business, a language learning institute for children, and then, different life enrichment activities for their parents. And it was going quite well. It was something that we could do as a family. So we could homeschool our children, give something to them, bring other children into that. So we would do culinary classes. We would teach martial arts. My ex-husband was very good at judo. And so he would teach our boys judo and bring other kids into that at the same time. They had judo classes a couple times a week. I was teaching cooking classes. We were doing dancing. We were learning English. It was a beautiful, I would say, very wholesome, very nurturing time for all of us. But as time goes on, so on one hand, we were a good team. My ex-husband and I, we were a good team, raising our boys well. Everyone looked in and said, "Wow, you guys are like a power couple." And on the outside, yes, we did seem that way. But when your marriage is built on I would say, I don't even know what kind of a foundation I can call this, because when you're coerced into something, when you don't really have a choice, you think you have a choice, but you don't, because there aren't any other options. And you're not ever allowed to consider that there would be other options. You're basically told, this is the person you're meant to marry, and love each other and get on, and then be a good team and do what you need to do. You don't have any other choice. So that is coercion, and that is manipulation, and that is abuse. And that is what our marriage was built on from the beginning. And we did the best we could with what we had, and even with each other. We loved each other as two people can. But when you're so broken in yourself, it's like, how much do you have to give to the other person, or to even create in a marriage or in a relationship? And I think we did really well, and we faked it for a very long time. Even, we didn't necessarily know we were faking it. We were just doing what we had to do. But then years pass and things get a bit more stable, and then you start to grow up a little bit more, and you start to understand that the world is different than how you were raised as a child and as a young person into your early 20s, early, even late 20s. And over time, we grew apart. And it wasn't that we didn't love each other. It was that when your marriage isn't formed on the right foundation in the first place, it can only last so long until everything just kind of falls to pieces. And eventually it did. It fell to pieces. And looking back, that wasn't necessarily my fault or his fault. We did make mistakes, but it's like, we were set up for disaster. We were set up for things to go awry. And I didn't ever really process this at the time. At the time, when things were kind of really all coming undone, I was quite upset and angry at him because of things that he had done that had really hurt me. And I had also hurt him. But I always looked at it like, well, he did it first. He did things first that were just really wrong and that hurt me from the get-go, from even the time that we were dating. And, over time, we've, forgiven each other, we've had conversations, we've understood each other, we've co-parented well together. But I think there was just something that, for me, it was just always like, yeah, that's just the way it was. We talked about this little box, just putting things in a box. So it was kind of like that. And then after taking out that picture and looking at Ryan and seeing his little face, that led me to start, I was pulling out other pictures because I was actually putting together the photos for our first episode. You were sending me photos, I was sending you photos. I was putting together the photos for our Christmas episode so we could talk about, our childhood and our performing. And I start to pull out other photos. So I've got all these photos from our past, from our childhood, from our family, my ex-husband and Ryan and Broderick. And on the other side, I have all these photos for this Christmas present that I'm putting together. So I got remarried last year in April. And on our wedding day, we had a photographer take pictures of us. And he took gorgeous, lovely photos. And they've all been, we have one album of them for ourselves, but the rest of them have just been in digital copies on my laptop. And I wanted to do something for our family. They're lovely pictures, and they're pictures of our family who was with us on that day. So what I did was I printed out a bunch of these pictures and I got these photo frames. I did three sets, one for my sister-in-law, one for my parents-in-law, and then also one for mom and dad. So I had all these pictures out and all these frames out, but as I'm looking back at the two of them, they're like these, like this juxtaposition between my past and my present. And I'm looking at these gorgeous pictures of our wedding day and I'm putting them all in, I'm slotting them in. And these, creations are coming, out. And then on the other hand, I've got all these pictures from childhood and then these pictures of when my ex-husband and I first got married and these pictures of our honeymoon. And I'm looking at myself. I was actually like 8 months heavily pregnant at the time we went for our honeymoon. And I was so young. I just looked like a young girl with a huge tummy. And then I pull out this picture of my ex-husband, and we were on a river raft, and he looks so young. He looks so young in this photo. He was just, I think, if I was 19, he was just about to turn 21. And I'm looking at this picture, and in that moment, he looked like just a boy to me. And I started to feel like, oh, wow, that and how many years I was 19 at that time. And I'm looking at now all these pictures of me when I got married at 38, the time between then and now. I'm so different. But then I'm also looking at, well, he was just a boy. And I guess I just felt in that moment this sense of a lot of, I felt compassion and more love and understanding, like he was really young. But then at the same time, I started to feel like a lot of sadness and grief. Like we were so young, we hardly knew anything. He was just a boy. And I believe at that moment, he loved me the best he knew how. He was just a child in many ways. And he loved me as he knew he could or should have loved me. He didn't know any better than that. And I just felt like, oh, I broke down and I started weeping and crying because I'm like, he was just a boy. And as much, the hurt and the pain and everything that we went through, he really did, I believe, try his best given what he knew. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. I did too. But at that time, I guess I was just able to kind of hold the beauty of who he was as a person and as a young man, just newly married, but really still a boy. And what really hit me was I had my Spotify on and Adele's song came on. So it's a song, I'm not going to sing it very well, but I think it's called Go Easy on Me. And the chorus goes something like, um, go easy on me. I was just a child.
In this silence, baby, let me in. Go easy on me, baby. I was still a child, didn't get the chance to feel the world around me. I had no time to choose what I chose to do. So go easy on me.
And something else. And I'm looking at this picture of him and I'm just like bawling my eyes out. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, yes, of course, I'll go easy on you. It's not like I was really being very critical, but it was just a moment of realization like he was just a boy and he loved me. And it was horrible what we went through, and it was horrible what they put us through, what we had to endure. And at the same time, there was still love there. There was still so much goodness, and and then that's when really like kind of the weight of like just so sorrowful and so much grief. I'm like, what did we lose? What did we lose because we didn't know how to love each other? Because we had so much trauma. He was so broken. I was so broken. They threw us together and said, basically, make it work, and it's never ever going to work. And I had like this sense of like anger and rage, like how could they do this? But then tagged right onto that was like just so much grief and sadness and again just crying and crying. And the next song that came on was Gratitude. Um, maybe I'll share snippets of the song here afterwards. But there's a line that says something. So it's a Christian worship song, but it's basically saying that I'm going to praise you even though this happened. I'm going to praise you no matter what.
All my words fall short. I got nothing new. How could I express all my gratitude? So I throw up my hands, praise you again and again. 'Cause all that I have is a hallelujah, hallelujah. I know it's not much, but I'm nothing else fit for a king, except for a heart singing hallelujah, hallelujah.
And I think it was feeling that grief and that loss and that heartache. And I'm going to praise you and I'm going to be grateful because there was still goodness in there. We still had 12, amazing years together. We raised two fantastic, beautiful, wonderful boys together. And I'm going to praise you and I'm going to be grateful and bless your name. In spite of all that, there's hardness and there's pain and there's also goodness. And I think it's being able to like hold that death and that heartache and then also understand that there is life, there is goodness. And that's really what healing is, right? And then even like the two sets of pictures, like that boy, that marriage, that pain and heartache, and then all the goodness that I have now. These are all the pictures of my wedding last year. And that's a lot to hold in that moment. And I was absolutely, all over the place. But being able to take those two things and be like, yes, I'm grateful. Thank you, God. This is really hard. And I'm okay with it being hard. I'm okay with being a mess. And this is something that carried on for another several days. But it was, I think, so going back to what the podcast brought up, it brought up these things. So it's like when you start to talk about your past, it kind of puts you in this place where you're open to things coming into your life that you have to address. And maybe you've never addressed them before, and they've been in that little box, and you think you're keeping it under wraps. But when you say, hey, universe, work with me or work on me, you're opening yourself up. And when they come in that moment, I think having like self awareness, like I'm looking at this little picture of my son and I'm seeing tears in his eyes, and I'm like, how did I cause that? Because of my own pain and my own trauma. And then looking at the picture of my ex-husband and saying, I forgive you. And not even I forgive you because I was right and you were wrong. We were both wrong. We both had to share. But I forgive you for being so young and for hurting me. And thank you still for loving me the way you knew how. And then saying, and I had all that, and now I still have beauty and goodness. And it's not like I can only have one or the other because I can hold them together. And this is my wonderful husband now who loves me with all his heart and is a very different age that he was marrying me to my ex-husband. And I was loved by both of them. And there's a lot of goodness happening in that place as well. So I guess that's what the podcast brought up for me. And I'm going to stop talking now.
Oh, I'm like getting all misty. I'm like taking some deep breaths. Yeah, I so relate to everything you said about the past and stuff, bringing up, this bringing up stuff in the past, and yet I understand the grief, like just the, oh, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been this way. But yet also being grateful for, what, all of that brought me to this place right now. And I'm able to enjoy this beautiful relationship now, being the person I am, being the more self-aware person. And yeah, just being grateful and being able to hold both, because I think there is such a tendency of us of, if we have this good thing now, it must mean that the thing we had before that didn't work out was bad. And it's not, and almost like we have to villainize who we were in the past and who was in our life. And yes, some of those people were really probably unpleasant and made mistakes, but we also did as well. And it's very easy to kind of whitewash who we were in the past. Either we whitewash it or we totally villainize ourselves, like, you were a terrible person, but I'm this person now. And just that it doesn't have to be so black and white. And there can be yes and, not yes but. And just, yeah, that's like, oh, I can so relate to all the things you said. That's why I think I was misting up, because yeah. And with the music, the songs coming on at the right time, oh, total game changer, killer for me. It just brings things to another level. I'm
Oh,
just,
yes.
oh.
Another
Thank
level
you.
for sure. It's like you just like signed up for the, I don't know, 2.0 or whatever that is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's next level stuff. But it does something as well. It released, like maybe I had all these emotions and I was grappling with them and the music hit, I was just like, whoa, you know.
Yeah,
But it was
yeah.
good. It was cathartic. The cathartic?
Cathartic, yeah.
Cathartic, yes, it felt like a release and I was just weeping there. I'm like, I'm so glad nobody else is home right now.
Oh, that's me all the time. Like, okay, I'm just gonna be, but it feels so much lighter, like you've let something go. There's been some realization. It's been closure in a way, right?
Mm,
So yeah,
yes,
I love that.
yeah. Mm. Oh, I'm so flushed. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, so those were some like the yeah, patterns, themes, and meanings. So just that mindfulness, realizing what's coming up and then asking a question, being a bit curious, like what does this mean? And then being able to grieve and then yeah, hold the past and the present together. Yeah, there's goodness
I
there.
think
It's
that
very
skill
wholesome.
of being curious, that is, I we try to jump so
Excuse me.
closer, right? There must be some meaning. I must find the meaning, and I can feel my brain doing this.
Mm,
Feel my brain doing this in my sessions, and when my therapist is just like, just feel and see what's coming up for you. And I can feel my body is going, oh, emotions, sensations. My brain's going, find the meaning, find the meaning. It's like, just like that snake trying to find stuff. And I'm just like, whoa, brain, take a chill pill. Like, let me just experience this. And it's really interesting because at the end, and again, I feel like school encourages this in kids, like, must get to the answer as fast as possible, the most efficient way, right? And not just enjoying the process. And I think probably growing up in Asia didn't really help either, where it was very, very results oriented, and the process was the teacher will come in and do it for you as long as the end picture looks pretty. And that
yeah.
bothered me. That I
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
come on, let the kid do what they do. And even though the end is messy, they're like, no, parents paid for a beautiful product. The teacher must come in and help the child. And I was like, oh, kind of, yeah. Anyway, but I feel that almost sometimes at the end of early on in my therapy sessions, and sometimes I still do it. This getting to the end and being like, after the integration and like, what are you taking away with you? And I feel like, oh, my chance for a gold star. Am I going to get the right answer? Like, can my brain find what the meaning was? And sometimes and on the times where I'm like, you know what? I'm not really sure. It's kind of brought up more questions. I might have to go away and think about that. She's like, that's okay too. That's okay. That's part of the process. And in my head, I'm like, didn't get to the answer. No gold star for you. But that process of sometimes just being curious and being like, whoa, it actually brought up more questions than I had at the beginning, but in a good way, because I know there's an answer in there somewhere. I just have to dig a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I always find that trying to get to the result, get to the meaning, get to the resolution too fast, you can really miss so much in the process.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that just actually taking more time, in case you do feel your brain like mine going, where's the answer? Where's the answer? Just go, whoa, chill, take a chill pill. Let's experience this a little bit more, because there's so much more here we're
There's
going to
so
miss.
much there. Yes. Yes, exactly. And it's the layers. And once you give yourself permission to like, yeah, okay, all right, that's all right. We can handle this. We can do it. Then it's like, okay, next, me, explore me, please. It's never
Yes.
ending. Yeah, but it's good. All right, so we have a bit of time. We can share how we came up with this very special and crazy name, Sondervous, for our podcast. There's a story behind it, and we'd love to share it with you. Um, so I think it started like it was like December, middle of December, and we said like, yeah, we're gonna do this. We're going to record our first podcast. We want to share our journeys with others. We want to, create something meaningful and valuable. And then we were trying to think of what would be a good name for us. And what we discovered was that every single name we came up with, it had already been taken. There was already a podcast with that title, like every man and his dog had started a podcast, and we were just too late to the game. Yeah, so that went on for a while. So I was thinking something fun that we could do was go back to mine and Victoria's chat log and talk about how we came
Embarrassing.
up. We can read our conversation. It's quite funny. Yeah. Do you have your phone there, Vix?
I do. I have to scroll like way up though. I think
Way
we've
back.
talked quite a bit since then.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna give you
Oh
the
yes, I
real-time experience for how we came up with this name. Yeah. So if anyone else has recently started a podcast, please let us know how you came up with the name for yours and what challenges you had in, if it had already been taken. I mean, I guess it's not a problem if someone else has the same name, but if you really want to make it yours and if you want it to stand out from the crowd, then you want it to be yours. And if it's someone else's, it can't really be yours, only yours, exclusively yours. So, hmm. Okay, so we started off like we came up with this name, what was it? Safe Conversations. Safe Conversations was the first idea we came up with. And so I made a little logo for it and I was sending it back and forth and to Vix and I, and we were actually like looking at the icon of a image of a chrysanthemum because a chrysanthemum is supposed to be something with, I can't remember exactly what does it represent? Maybe it's something a heart back to our Asian Chinese heritage. And then it's also supposed to be like some symbol of wellness, of goodness, of safety, peace, security. But then I go and I do a little bit more of a search, and it's like, no, sorry, there's already a Safe Conversations podcast out there. I'm like, dang, okay, all right, well, let's go and look for another name. And then this is when it starts to get really difficult. Okay. Hmm.
Oh man.
Okay. So I say, I asked Vicky, I said, okay, so chats for growth? Question mark. Paradigm shifts? Question mark. Cozy chats? Question mark.
I
Vicky, you
say
read
I like
yours.
cozy. Something that gives the impression of safety, warmth, nurturing, authenticity. And it doesn't have to be cozy. I kind of like the feel of two girlfriends chatting over wine kind of feeling, right? And Michelle's like, I'm gonna go to Ask AI.
Yes, like I'm gonna go ask AI for help. So I like I gave AI a prompt. Create a list of catchy name choices for a podcast that gives the impression of safety, warmth, nurturing, and authenticity. And it goes and it gives me a big long list. Safe Harbor Chronicles, Nurtured Narratives, Warm Wisdom Waves, Authentic Haven Insights, Cocooned Conversation.
Conversations. I was like, I like that.
Yes,
Cocoon
Vicky like
conversation.
cocoon
Oh man.
conversations. Uh,
I was like, it's catchy.
cozy nook chats, all this stuff. Yeah. Tranquil Tales Unplugged, Safe Space Symposium, Cozy Compass conversations. Anyhow, there's a lot. They gave us a lot of options to choose from. I said, I think let's go for Cozy Chat Podcast. Simple, comfortable, non-assuming. It invites the listener in, like you said. And then I go and I do a search, and someone's already tagged a Cozy Chat Podcast, Cozy Chat, Cozy Chat. I'm like, okay, well, let's try another one, Nurturing Narrative. And again, Nurturing Narrative Podcast, Nurturing Narratives Podcast. And then I'm kind of getting a bit disillusioned here. I'm like, oh, I'm convinced there is no new thing under the sun. I thought of time for a cuppa, because I'm based in the UK and, people like their cup of teas. So time for a cuppa or sip and chat, but all of them are already out there.
Yeah. And so we
Yeah.
talked, I said, Cocoon Conversations is kind of cute. It's catchy, but there is like another podcast with that name already, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you
So
Googled and showed me all
we
the.
keep taking screenshots of what we find. There's already podcast. This one's already taken. This one's already taken. And I say, we're going to end up calling it the No Name Podcast. I'm like, oh, maybe another language.
I say, oh, so Cozy Conversations? Nope. It's like, damn it, already out there. And then
Already
Michelle
taken,
goes into
damn it.
her, let's go to another language and try to
Yes.
find.
And now I'm like thinking like another language. So I was looking on Amazon a couple months ago for wall art, and I found this word. It's in is it what language is
Danish
it?
or Norwegian, yeah.
Norwegian, and it's called. I don't even. I to say it here, and I still don't know. I said I don't even know how to pronounce it yet, but it's called Hugi Huge
Huge.
Huge. Hygge. It's Danish. It's a word in Danish and Norwegian that describes a cozy, contented mood evoked by comfort and conviviality. I can't even see it. Conviviality. So we're like, okay, so let's maybe try this Hygge place. But no, it's already been taken. Holy, I didn't even notice that. Holy Hygge, Hygge.
Hugo.
It's
Yeah.
taken. And I'm like, no.
It's like we're playing catch up with all the other podcasts.
I say, yeah, looks like we started in the wrong decade.
And then my business mind coming in. This is a great content piece, by the way. Picking a name for a podcast.
Yes.
I was looking for the upside, right?
Yes. And then I say, think we're going to have to ask AI again for concepts of peace, well-being, and safety in other languages. And I said, maybe we should use a pun, Gold Diggers Podcast.
I said, we'd certainly get views. Oh.
Yes. So something in Chinese, maybe, or the name of a flower, a bird, a tree, a stone. But it's like playing categories.
I was like, we should name our podcast the Scattered Sisters Podcast, Scatterbrain Sisters.
Scatterbrain Sisters, yes. So we came up with a bunch. AI gave us a bunch more choices. I say, ooh, AI's done well here. I gave it a good prompt. Check below. Give me another list of uncommonly known words that mean cozy, safe, well-being, comfortable, and nurtured. It came up with a pretty good list of words. You want to read some of them, Vix?
We have cocooned, quiescent, soothed, halcyon, ephemeral, placid, some Welsh name, which I can't pronounce, gloaming, virgin, umbra. Okay, just like words that are completely. It's just like panacea, dulcet, ephemeral. I can't even pronounce that word. I know Quixote, but quixotic. I don't know. I can't pronounce these words because they're Greek and Latin. And yes, okay, definitely uncommonly known words.
Uncommonly known words.
Xenophile, philoprogenitive. Oh my goodness. I didn't read all of these.
Yeah, there's a lot. And the last one, I don't know how to pronounce number 40, Vix. It's a
Yes, a
pluviophile.
pluviophile.
A pluviophile. English. A person who finds joy and peace of mind during rainy days. And I say, just for let's, we should choose the very last one, the A Pluviophile Podcast. Okay, and here we're coming down to
where we start to like,
yes.
yeah. So I said, I think in one of those it was like Sonder. And I said, Sonder was a word I actually learned recently, and it's super deep.
I say, ooh, I love it. And it's so accurate as well. The Sonder Podcast. Check it quickly.
I'm like, quick, hope no one took it. Oh, and I send her a screenshot. Yep, the Sonder Podcast, sure enough.
Of course, of course. I'm like, lol, this is hilarious. Memory jar. We're back on the treadmill. Memory jar.
Like, nope, it's taken.
Not taken. Said, I got it. We'll combine Sonder and another word.
So you type that into AI, right?
Did I type it in? Yes.
Sonder is a
Please,
root word.
Sonder is a root word, yes. Please come up with a list of words using Sonder as a root word, meaning a place to share stories and connect with people from all walks of life. And good old trusty Chat GPT comes up with Sondersphere, Sonderloom, Sonderhub, Sondervista, Sonderjunction, Sondernook, blah, blah, blah. Yes. But the one who finally got it in the end, so I Sondernook chats. I like Sonderloom too. Sonder Rendezvous podcast. Too long.
And then I'm
And
like,
then
Sondervous? I think people are totally going to mispronounce it.
clap, 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 clap. Emoji, emoji.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it. So the Sondervous podcast.
Sondervous podcast. So I say, brilliant. I love it. We can put the pronunciation next to it with IPA.
Finally, something unique. Yay. And then Google to check that no one took Sondervous. And no.
Yes.
Google says, did you
No one
mean
took it.
so nervous?
So nervous. So nervous. And
Oh,
Rendezvous
man.
and Sondervik. So yes, Google could not find Sondervous anywhere.
Yes.
And I said I would have
Those,
eaten my own heart if someone had it.
yes.
Vicky got, I got so nervous too. Pronounced Sondervous.
And so I said, what's the definition of Sondervous since we just made up this word?
Said, oh, brilliant. I'll ask AI to write a definition for our new word. Please write me a definition and description of the word Sondervous, which is a combination of sonder and rendezvous. Rendezvous. So the Chat GPT's definition. Sondervous is a coined term that blends sonder, representing the profound realization that each individual has a complex and vivid life, with rendezvous, signifying a planned meeting or gathering. As such, a Sondervous is a purposeful and meaningful coming together of people from diverse backgrounds, fostering an environment where individuals share their unique life stories and experiences.
Yeah, we got it.
That is the
And Joe,
story of how
yeah.
we came up with the name for this podcast, Sondervous. Very unique.
Yes. We're like, we
Yeah,
should trademark it, but
we
you
should
know,
trademark
in the
it.
future, maybe nobody else
Yeah,
better take it.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it was fun. It was fun going through that process and seeing all the things that were not there, that we couldn't, grab and take as our own, and then finding our very own unique, special name.
Unique.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like similar to our journey as well. You have to kind of go through a lot of things and find out where it ain't before you find out where it is.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's for me. Maybe that's for me. Maybe it should be that. Oh, man. And then finally, ooh, what about this? And this seems kind of new and different, a
Mm,
bit weird. Nobody else, like, again, just making it up as you go along, and then finding, like, actually, you know what? That completely encapsulates us and what we're about in our life. And just, yeah, it's like really interesting. And like I said, kind of like a small, don't even the word I'm looking for, but a small representation of kind of us and our personalities and our
mm,
journey about, oh,
yeah.
kind of having this weird background and coming up so different to everybody else. But yet that's what makes it unique. And that's what makes us us and authentic. And yeah,
Mm,
nobody else shares our experience.
yeah. And sometimes it doesn't matter how long you look or how hard you look, you may not ever find, or it may not even exist, something that, is already out there. It may not represent or define who you are. You have to create that. You have to bring it to life because like we were looking, no. And finally we're like, well, let's just, create something. We have to make up
Oh,
our own name. And yeah, sometimes you do. You have to just, create something absolutely new. And yeah, I'm very happy with our name, and I like it, and I hope it starts trending soon. Yeah. All
yes.
right. Great. So yeah, that's the end of our episode for today. And thank you guys so much again for listening, for being compassionate witnesses to our own stories, and also for holding our stories sacred and honoring them, because it does take a lot of vulnerability to share with you these things that we're going through. It's not easy, and we do take a risk in bringing these things and sharing them with you. So thank you for seeing us, hearing our stories, and holding them in your hands as well. That means a lot to us. And like Vix and I were saying, eventually we hope that once you get to know us well and we start to build those who we offer value to, we hope to start inviting other people onto this podcast. If you have a story that you would like to share, or something that is very meaningful for you, we'd love to extend this space to include others as well. So yeah, looking forward to that in the future, and really happy to have you on this journey with us and a part of Sondervous. Okay. All right, guys, we will see you next time then. Bye.